Never sell what you cannot deliver. What's happening? It's Erik J. Olson. One of the guys that I listen to a lot, an influencer, his name is Grant Cardone, and he has a philosophy that you should always say yes when you're in a sales situation. No matter what the prospect says to you or what they request, the answer is always yes. Now, the reality is, he says that you should say yes and then you should clarify. But oftentimes, he also encourages you to just take the deal and you'll figure it out later. Now, what I've learned over the years is that when we take on some sort of work that we don't know how we're going to pull it off, there's a really high probability that we're going to screw things up. Here at Array Digital, we work with a certain type of client: law, medical, home services. That's our sweet spot. And there's an actual revenue range of between about 2 and $20 million in revenue. Clients that fit that prospect or that persona, I should say, are ideal prospects. Whenever we take on something outside of that, or if it's a service that we don't do, and our services are website development, SEO, online advertising, and social media. If we do something outside of those four services and outside of our ideal prospect, there's a really good chance we're going to screw it up. And we've learned this the hard way. Whenever there's an exception or whenever we decide that we're going to sell something before we figure out how we're going to actually service it, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. I keep saying in this podcast, communication is always the problem. Whenever you do something that is different than the norm, you have to communicate, over communicate, cross communicate, and say it all over again the next day. It's exhausting. And that's why we have process. We have process so that we don't have to always try to remember to communicate, because as human beings, we are going to forget to communicate. It's in our nature. No matter how hard you try, that this one thing, this one client, this one service, that something is different than the norm, we're probably going to screw it up. Or it's going to take a tremendous amount of energy to pull off that service where the energy required does not have a positive ROI. So here we have a very strict list of services that we will provide, a very strict list of platforms that we will support when it comes to, say, social media and advertising and website development and even SEO, frankly, and we stick to it. Now, I'm not saying we don't ever change, but when we change, it's strategic and we know what we're about to get into before we change. Because if we don't know and we try to figure it out on the fly, we'll likely forget to communicate the nuance of the thing that's different than normal. Our process will be totally screwed up and no one will know what's going on. And when that happens, guess what? That's when you screw up. And I don't like screwing up. So I think it's very important that you stick to a set of services that you provide and you stick with a perfect persona for the kinds of clients that you're going after. You do that and your chances of screwing up are much less. How much more successful would you be if you could harness the experience of a group of successful business owners? If you could learn from their successes and avoid mistakes they've made in the past? Array Mentors provides the framework and the guidance to help you find your way, get you on the right path, and accelerate your journey to more money and more success. Check out the details at arraymentors.com.